your search is over. Because here I'm going to be giving you the 27 best strategy games that you can play in right now. And yeah, absolute majority of those won't be an old school strategy games, which other lists are full of. Absolute majority of the games here are modern games enjoyed by modern gamers. And if there is a game that you wanted to be here and I missed, let me know in the comments down below. Oh yeah, and not to waste your time to make you watch the games that you don't want to watch, every single game's timestamp will be available in the description down below, or you can just see it right here somewhere. And yeah, in no particular order, let's get it started. Number 1 is Age of Empires series. Yes, it's pretty classic, but it's also pretty modern as well. Age of Empires 4 being released just a few years ago. If you want a classic RTS without any gimmicks and just want to sit down and enjoy your game, whether it's a campaign or a multiplayer match, this game is simply great. With the simple yet very understandable gameplay mechanics, which can also get quite complex, but this game is must play for every strategy game lover genre. And yeah, I mean all of those games, starting with the first one, ending with the fourth one. But if you want something more fantastical, yet very similar to this game, number 2 is Age of Mythology, which got a remaster just a few years ago, and it's basically Age of Empires, but it's happening in ancient mythological times. You can play with Egyptian, Greek, Norse, or even Atlantean gods, and yet have the same simple yet quite deep gameplay as it was with Age of Empires. But if you want to go a bit beyond, a bit further, a bit deeper, and a bit more sci-fi, Dune Spice Wars is also a great choice. Dune Spice Wars is a great mix of 4X and RTS strategy, and it's happening in a Dune universe. You're playing on a planet Arrakis, and your goal is to control one of the great houses, or some of other factions as well, to take the control of the planet. Being in early access, this game is also getting a bunch of updates and more expansions. But if you want something bigger in the scope, well, Civilization 6 is also an option. Yes, all Civilization games are great, but Civilization 6 is latest and the greatest of them all. Being a turn-based strategy where you need to take on your civilization from the earliest stages of development to the futuristic nations, this game is more reminiscent of a very complex chess game than anything else. Yet if you don't like the emphasis on civilization in the game and you want more emphasis on cultures instead, Humankind is practically the same game but focusing more on cultures. It's very similar to Civilization, but a bit more fluid and dynamic with much more dynamic maps and much more fast-paced gameplay. But if you don't care about taking your culture from prehistoric to futuristic, well, you can go with an Old World instead. Old World is a very similar game to previous two, but it's happening, well, as you can guess, in an old world. But unlike previous two games, you don't just take control of your civilization, you're literally the leader of the civilization and you have your family intrigues and much more different things. But if you want to go into more fantasy instead, well, Age of Wonders 4, it will help you. Age of Wonders 4 is one of the latest games that released in this list, and it may be even one of the greatest, giving you an amazing turn-based strategy gameplay and an insane amount of customization of your fantasy nation. You can play it with literally any type of fantasy nation that you want, both that is included in the game and also that you can build yourself. It's a fantastic game that I can recommend to everyone, but if you want something that is more classic and something more grounded, well, Total War series is the best choice. And yes, I mean the entire series. But if you want to be more specific, I'm gonna give you two options within this one entry. First, if you want to go into more fantasy realm, then yeah, Total War Warhammer games, all of them, all three of them are a fantastic choice. Happening in a Warhammer universe, this game is deep and oozing with lore and also with an amazing gameplay features. But if you want to go more realistic route, well, I would suggest you to go with Rome 2 instead. Total War Rome 2 is happening during Roman times, giving you ability to take control over Mediterranean and all surrounding areas. Being a Total War game, it's very deep and very interesting and fun to play. But for some people, turn-based nature is not the most fun. They want more real time. But yeah, if you want Total War but in real time, I'll give you Knights of Honor 2. Knights of Honor 2 is also one of the newest games in the list. And in the simplest words, if I can explain it, this game is a Total War, but in real time. You take control of any nation during the medieval times, at least in Europe, Middle East, or North Africa, and you play the game in very similar fashion as Total War, but fully in real time, including all the combats. And despite this game being as complex as Total War games, it's much more accessible and much more easy to get into. But let's say if you want more explosions, and you want more closer to modern times, well, I'll give you Company of Heroes. Company of Heroes 2 and 3 in this case is my games of choice. Personally, I like Company of Heroes 3 a lot, but a lot of gamers did not like it because it did not fill up the shoes of led by Company of Heroes 2, which was pretty big shoes to fill. But both of those games are great World War II strategy games, giving you an ultimate control over a battlefield in World War II scenarios. Every single soldier counts, and you will need to make very tough decisions in order to win in those games. But if you don't want this and you want something that is more relaxing, let's say something like city building, I give you Anno 1800. Anno 1800 is the latest entry in an Anno series, and it gives you control of your nation, well, in 1800s. Build out the city and fulfill all the needs of your citizens to make them best best in the world. Game is not that difficult to get into, but yet very complex to master. And with a barrage of expansions, this game will keep you busy for really long time. But let's say you want a city builder, but for the modern times. Well, it's a City Skylines then. City Skylines is the best city builder game, period. It gives you the control over your city like no other game, and you will be able to build the modern city of your dreams in just a few clicks. Or a few thousand. The simulation in this game is insane and probably second to none. And the only game that actually might top this might be City Skylines 2 when it will eventually release. But it will be in the future, and let's now focus on the past. And the past was very colorful and full of intrigues, just like in Crusader Kings 3. Crusader Kings 3 is also turn-based strategy, but instead of focusing on warfare in the medieval times, it's actually focusing on court intrigues. So practically it's a Game of Thrones, but as a strategy. Control your dynasty and create the greatest empire of all time, and the dynasty that will survive for centuries. The amount of roleplay in this strategy game is insane, and the only thing that is limiting this game is that, well, it's time. So if you want something that is happening a bit more into the future, you can go with Europa Universalis 4. Very similar game, but focusing more on the strategy part of the game rather than the family part. And it's happening after the medieval times, giving you the ability to take control of any nation in an entire world. Europa Universalis is a huge, especially with its extensive amount of mods. But if you want something more, again, with more explosions and a little bit more modern, or rather a little bit more later in the history, you can go with Hearts of Iron 4. It's a very similar game to Europa Universalis, but instead of happening in, well, Renaissance period, it's happening during World War II. So if you're interested in what would happen if you took control of any country in the world during this time, what would happen with the World War II, well, you can see it with this game. Just mind that this game is quite complex and it will take you a while to become good at this, but when you will probably not be able to drop this game. But now let's look into the star. Let's look into space. To Endless Space 2. Endless Space 2 is a turn-based space game, which is quite underrated, giving you able to control your space empire of your choice. Game has interesting story system and a quest system, giving a story to everything that you do in this, well, space. But it's a bit small in scope, and if you want something that is much larger and also in real time, well, there is of course always Stellaris. In my opinion, the best space strategy of all time. Stellaris is absolutely massive, giving you ability to play with any type of space nation that you want. Want to create space colonies? You can. Want to create a criminal empire? You can. Want to create a hive mind and be the god emperor of the nation? You can. This game is insanely powerful and insanely deep. It's also quite complex, but not as difficult as the other Paradox games. And if you want something more real time, I give you Supreme Commander. Supreme Commander is a great RTS, very reminiscent to Age of Empires in its gameplay type, but it's happening in the future, and all the units that you control are very futuristic. But this game is a bit old, but instead of this, in the same entry, I will give you something that is more modern, and it is Planetary Annihilation. Planetary Annihilation is very similar to Supreme Commander, but unlike having a regular flat map, you are playing an entire solar system with multiple planets, which you can conquer, and if you want, even destroy. This game is insanely fun and very interesting, especially in multiplayer matches, because multiplayer matches are very fun and very flashy, and you will absolutely love it. Of course, if you learn how to play it well. But if you like this premise of having multiple planet and star system and you want to focus more on building part, I'll give it Dyson Sphere program. Dyson Sphere program is technically a factory builder, but it's also a strategy. You control your single mech and your goal is to build, well, Dyson Sphere, but it's much more easier said than done. You need to take control of resources not just on multiple planets, but in multiple star systems, setting up not just the regional logistics or even planetary logistics, but also interplanetary and even interstellar. Game is in early access, and is also expanding more and more as time progresses, and it is not the game that you really want to miss, if you like the space games, of course. But one game overtakes it in its sheer complexity, and I'm pretty sure you haven't heard of it, and it's Nebulous Fleet Command. Nebulous Fleet Command is a space battle strategy game, and you gain control of a fleet of different ships. But unlike any other strategy games, this game is focusing on realism, because yes, space is not ground, and most often than not, you will not be even able to see your enemies when they will destroy you, and the same with this game. This game is incredibly complex and very difficult, yet if you learn it, it's an incredibly rewarding experience. But if you want a little bit more relaxing, if you want a little bit more about building rather than destroying, Ixion or Ixion, however it's pronounced, is a great choice. It is actually a colony building and management sim, or rather if you want to call it city builder in space, where you control your space colony and also set up your interplanetary logistics. And what differentiating this game from other games is it's very deep and very interesting story, which of course I won't be spoiling because you need to experience it yourself. And speaking of story, what's better than the Star Wars? Well, Star Wars Empire at War. Star Wars Empire at War is an older strategy game and probably isn't oldest in this list, but I really wanted to include this because yeah, you would be mad if I wouldn't. Take part in a battle against the Empire or for the Empire if you want and live the glory days of a Star Wars' well, best times. Let's move to the ground and move to something that is in the middle of different genres, and it's Against the Storm, the game that is quite underrated. This game is a weird mix of roguelike and city builder game, which is focusing on not just on building the perfect systems, but the systems that actually work, because eventually you will lose and your goal is to get as far as you possibly can. It's a great take on strategy genre and great take on roguelikes as well. You of course need to experience. Speaking of something that you need to experience, Rimworld. Yes, Rimworld is a colony building sim, but technically it's a strategy as well. And yeah, if you know Rimworld, you know Rimworld. Rimworld is not just a strategy game, it's a story generator that gives you an incredible amount of different scenarios that will practically never repeat in any 2 playthroughs. And your overall goal is to, well, your colony to survive, but most likely it will not because of how weird the game AI director can get. It's also important how weird can players get while playing this game. If you know, you know. But if you want something that is more grounded and something that is more realistically looking and something that is easier to comprehend, Stranded Alien Dawn is also another game like Rimworld, but it's also in full 3D and much better graphics. You crash land on alien planet with few different survivors and your goal is, well, to survive and eventually maybe even save yourself or even establish outposts if you're playing on multiple different scenarios. Game just out of early access and is getting a bunch of different upgrades, so you don't want to miss them. Speaking of something that you don't want to miss, Frostpunk is also a strategy game that you don't want to miss. Playing in a dystopian future where everything is frozen over, you need to take control of your city in order for it not to die. You need to make very difficult decisions and very brutal decisions to make it through the harsh winter, which most likely you will not. This game is very gloomy and very brutal, but if you want something more lighthearted, Timberborn is also a great choice. In Timberborn, you play as a, well, sentient beavers, and your goal is to build city for the beavers. It doesn't sound very serious, but it's very serious and very great strategy game. It's also a city builder, there is no combat and things like that, and it's very relaxing and fun experience. Well, this was a lot, 27 great strategy games, and if you play them all, trust me, you will never be bored and you will never want to play any other strategy game for quite a while. And again, if I missed some, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I will do another list. Well, this will be it for today. Thank you for being here with me. Like the video if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. See ya.